Hi, and welcome to the Ham Shack. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the history of my call sign, W2AEW. So W2AEW is a vanity call sign, and I picked it because the AEW are my initials. Now, of course, before I got the call sign years and years ago, someone else was given the call sequentially by the FCC. And for many years I've known that a previous holder of the call sign was this gentleman here, Walter Holt, from Glendora, New Jersey. I've learned that Mr. Holt held the call sign from the late 40s through the 50s, and even into the 1960s. This card is from 1961. And I thought that, well, maybe that's where the story ended in terms of, the previous holders of W2AEW. But fairly recently, a friend of mine sent me a link to an eBay ad for this call sign, or excuse me, this QSL card. Now this card is also W2AEW, but we can see it's from a Bob Stevens from Scotia, New York, 1931. So now there's another gentleman that has held W2AEW. So maybe this is the complete history, and I think it might be. This is for a couple of reasons. If Mr. Holt held the call in through the 1960s, I've had the call for 15 years or so. So in between there, that's modern enough within the last 30 or 40 years that I probably would have found some evidence of somebody else that would have held this call sign. Now it certainly wouldn't have been reissued by the FCC, so the only other person that would have held it before Mr. Holt would have been somebody who would have picked it up as a vanity call sign, and that's pretty unlikely before me. So there may have been somebody between Mr. Holt and Mr. Stevens, but I'm not sure if there might have been. I haven't found any evidence of that. And I don't think anybody may have held W2AEW before Mr. Stevens. And the reason for that is that in the late 20s is when they started issuing the W as a prefix on US call signs. Prior to that, this would have been just, say, 2AEW. Now this card is from 1931, so that's only just a few years before this card was mailed. So I tend to doubt that somebody else had W2AEW before Mr. Stevens. But that also means that there was probably somebody that had 2AEW. So I had sent off, again, on a search online, and several years ago I found that 2AEW was actually issued to a gentleman named Edward Harold from Newark, New Jersey in 1922. And I found a really interesting autobiography, or technical autobiography, of Mr. Harold online. And he was a really interesting guy. He was an engineer, he worked at RCA, and was actually pretty instrumental in the development of the color television picture tube. So just pretty interesting stuff. So I've been on a search for a couple of years to try to find a QSL card from Mr. Harold to AEW, and so far not been successful. But recently in my search I also learned that 2AEW was issued in 1920, or I should say was held in 1920 by another gentleman named Henry C. Kessler from Ridgewood, New York. So now I know there were at least two people that held the call sign 2AEW prior to the prefixes being issued. And I've yet to turn up any QSL cards from either of them. So now my quest is a little bit to try to find a card from either or both of those gentlemen, and then maybe frame the whole set of W2AEW and 2AEW cards and put them up here in the Ham Shack. So if any of you guys out there, hams, have got old QSL card collections, or if you know folks that have got old QSL card collections, really be interested to try to find a card or two from either of these two gentlemen that held 2AEW, or if there was anybody else that had either of these two call signs, either 2AEW or W2AEW. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.